So I was asked specifically not to wear a suit because of the large corporation I work for, but instead I put on a Good to see there's some fanboys here. All right. So, like Niall said, my name is Beaudoin. I'm an accessibility subject matter expert, as they say in IBM, and I usually specialize in the financial sector. I suck at blogging. I don't do Twitter, whatever. But you can find me at GitHub. You can find me at LinkedIn. Normally, that's the best place to find me in any of my applications. So, first off, interact with the audience. What is accessibility?
Fantastic.
What?
Fantastic.
Okay, it's fantastic. All right. I was expecting a little bit more of maybe like Deb saying something like ARIA tags or something like that. Anyone else? Anyone else?
For the blind.
For the blind. Yeah. Yeah. Deb. Yeah. Yes. How usable something is. Yeah. Yeah. One more. Keyboard navigation. I heard. Sorry. Removal of barriers. Yeah. All correct answers. Actually, you guys are a positive group. Usually I hear stuff like, oh, it's something like my boss makes me do, you know, like regulations. You know, I have to read 1,000 lines of checklists and stuff like that. But in the end, I mean, accessibility is really all about inclusion. It's getting your app or product or software or whatever usable by as many people as humanly possible. All right, yet again, interaction number 2. Show of hands. First off, does anyone know someone who is blind? Yes. Does anyone know someone who has mobility issues? Keep your hands up. Okay, mobility issues, all right. Does anyone know someone who is deaf? So I want you to keep your hands up, and everyone look around the room a little bit. You can kind of see how many hands are up. And this is a little bit representative of what most people think of when they think of accessibility. They think of maybe 10, 15% of the population and how I mean, those people, like that's how we're designing apps, and these are the people we're designing for. But, so you ask that question again, does anyone know someone who is maybe distracted easily? Or, or someone who is colorblind? Or someone who has maybe had a broken arm or wears glasses? Okay, anyone who, I see someone choosing. So if nobody knows anyone who has any of these conditions, then you probably should go out a little bit more. But what's important to know is that we all may have issues in our lives. They could be permanent, they could be temporary, they could be situational. I don't need to go through this entire slide. I mean, this is made by Microsoft. They have an inclusive design toolkit, which allows you to like look and see exactly. But this kind of reframes the question to be more, just to put it more situational. Like, for example, a distracted driver has issues seeing what's in front of them when they're using their phone or something like that. Maybe you can consider something like that. So why is it important? It is the right thing to do. and it's also the law. If you do business in Ontario and you have over 20 employees in your company, your site or app or whatever must be accessible. Now, they're never going to come down with it. This is the truth. Unless someone starts to complain, then you will have regulatory issues to deal with. But, by and large, it's just the right thing to do. I mean, case study, Netflix. There's a class action lawsuit in 2010. The National Association for the Deaf made claims against Netflix saying there are not enough captions on their content. So Netflix turned around and said, well, 100% of the content will be accessible, will have captions by 2014. And then by 2016, any new show or movie that goes on their service will be fully captioned within 7 business days. Now, who benefits from all this? Well, in fact, we all do. Not only people who are deaf, but everyone. I mean, you can ask any new parent. You don't want to turn this, with your volume up when you need to watch Netflix, into this. I mean, this is definitely not like the way you want to go when you're watching TV in the basement. You got to turn the volume up. See, we can all benefit. And a perfect example of this is, you know, perhaps having bigger font on a mobile device, on your app, something like that. Just making the font a little bit bigger is quite a benefit for everybody. Or allowing a user to adjust the zoom on their device. Now, please don't disable this feature. This is a required feature for any accessible mobile web application. You have to be able to zoom in. And a lot of sites don't include a button in there to increase the font size or maybe another example of something we've all benefited from is a reasonable timeout time in banking applications. 10 minutes is not a standard anywhere that anyone says it must be 10 minutes like that. But the guidelines through the WCAG require that web developers will create a timeout session that is long enough. And that means you can extend it by pressing a button. There's no regulatory. So how do we implement accessibility? Most of you are devs, I assume, or work in tech, or something like that. We start off at the very, very beginning, in the design phase. You have to think about things like color contrasts, or font sizes, or button sizes, and the outline around them, as well as menu location and size. This is a great tool. This is actually provided by WebAIM, which is a website with lots of resources for anyone who's developing web accessibility things. And you can just check to see if the color contrast between an image or a text or a font in its background passes a certain number. Now, there are standards, and the current standard that everyone should be developing towards is called AA standard. AA standard requires a 4.5 minimum contrast ratio, and AAA standard is 7.1, but we only need to work at the 4.5 level by and large. So tools like this allow you to actually just input 2 colors, and it just spits out the contrast ratio. So that's available at the WebAIM website. Lots of resources for that. Oh, I have to say that designers, don't fall in love with how it looks, because I guarantee you it'll change. Right? I mean, no one. Someone is going to come in and say this isn't working, or that's too light, or it's hard to read. Because imagine if people who are fully sighted and fully cognitive are having issues with, say, it's too light. For anyone who has any minor disability or anything further than that, it'll be even more difficult for them to interact or read or what have you with your application. So, sprint 1, developers are in there, ready to get going. In web development, we already have structural HTML that is fully accessible. It's all ready to go. You've got inputs where you apply a label to it, you select with labels on it, and then these others, they're already fully accessible, ready to go. Screen readers hook into these different elements on your page and will read out, like a user can press a hotkey on their keyboard and it would list out all the links or the graphics or the headers on the site. And they can easily navigate through the site that way. So you have to think about that as well. Stop it with the widgets. I mean, we don't need them. Like I said before on the previous slide, headings are vitally important. They're not just for the size of titles. That's CSS. You should be styled with CSS. But navigation-wise, your headers are used by just pressing the H on it with the screen reader, and you'll navigate through all the different elements on that page. So these are vitally important. Forget about navigation. It's actually not preferred these days. Just semantically create your website properly.
It can be hidden, can't it?
Pardon?
Can it be hidden?
It can be hidden. Yep, it absolutely can be. Also, not only that, there are certain headers and like the structural parts of the website as well that the user would be able to navigate through. So your boss comes to you and says, okay, we got to make our site fully accessible by the end of next week. Where are your easy wins? Where are you as a developer going to look at to try and find out like how to improve your page? So first off, look for any graphics. Are there alt tags on your graphics? Do they represent truly what's what's in the graphic? And if the graphic is just there to look pretty, you don't have to put an alt tag. Just put a empty graphics. That's all you need to do. Does the UI completely break at 200% zoom? That's always my favorite thing to do. Whenever someone asks me, oh, come consult with me, like take a look at my site to see if it works. Great, I'll pop it up to 400% zoom and watch the entire response of that. Beautiful, but it falls apart. Like it's the best feeling in the world. Are there labels on every input or focusable element that requires it? So for selects and inputs. The label tag works fine, you can wrap it. There's lots of directions on how to do these little wins through online. Is the entire content accessible by just using the keyboard? So is every button reachable through tab? Is there tab flow logical? Does it hop around the site? Is there a focus outline on all your elements? That's another thing that designers don't like to hear. What do you mean I got to put an outline around every button? I don't like. Are there keyboard tracks? Now this is a big one. Imagine if the only way to navigate your entire site was to use the tab key or something like that, and you find a modal or something like that, and you can't escape from it. Or even worse, the tab starts going behind it. You're saying, are you sure you want to deposit this money into this account? And you start tabbing and it goes to the cancel button behind or to your accounts behind or something like that. There are times where you need to trap the focus where the main focus is on the site. There are other times where you have to be wary of it, especially on login screens. Tends to trap focus between the username and password, but what if I just wanted information? How do I get out of that loop? That's something to think about as well. Testing. Your site is up, ready to go, product is ready to be delivered, and now the tester or even the developer comes and says, okay, great, my job is now to test the site to make it fully accessible. Best way to do it is just to close your eyes, move the screen down, turn your volume up, and use a screen reader. That's going to be the easiest way for you to navigate a site and really figure out how the site performs or acts to someone who can't see. JAWS is the leader of screen reader currently. It does cost $1,000, so it could be a bit of a buy-in if you need tester JAWS. But there's great alternatives to that as well. Chromebox, NVDA, they're both free, they're both applications, they just work on both Windows and Mac. VoiceOver through Mac and iOS, important to test mobile accessibility as well with that. Narrator for Windows, Talkback for Android, there's lots of tools out there, but just get one on there. And especially Chromebox, that's now becoming such a popular option because everyone uses Chrome. And just installing a plugin that has a screen reader enabled to it. You can just tap through the page and read everything out. There are testing tools as well. Axe from DQ actually it'll spit out a report of your entire site. And it's Chrome plugin as well. And it just tells you all your accessibility violations. It'll tell you where on the site it is, where you need to fix it. And that's a great way of going through it as well. A little company called IBM created Adapt as well, which is yet again another Chrome plugin that you can use to analyze the site. Both free as well. All three of those are free. And also automated testing as well. So you can actually plug into your build process a tool that will just automatically scan the site and just tell you where your violations are. So pretty much it's the same thing as the testing tools that we'll call them, but does it through your build process too, just tell you your violations are. So your presentation. In summary, what is accessibility? It's inclusive design, development, and experience. It's getting your app usable by as many people as possible, and it's not just for blind people. Why is it important? Well, what's good for the few is often good for the many, as we saw with babies and Netflix and all like this. You can actually get more users on your site as well, because even though it is a smaller section of the population, the 15% to 10%, it does matter, and it will increase your user base. It is the right thing to do. And tiny there, don't forget it is the law, just as a quick reminder. How can it be implemented? Well, designers need to plan early in your requirements gathering phase. Get that in there. Developers need to add accessibility throughout the process. Gone are the days of a pull request simply being, okay, yes, this code is okay, push it out. So you've got to look for those tags. Are the inputs all labeled properly and stuff like that? It's very quick, and at that time is the perfect time to for a lead to say, no, go back and just fix those HTML tags. You're good to go. And testers can use automated tools or manually test it with screen. It's a very short talk. Don't have to go very deep into this. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Well, to one comment, I heard that the people who need this accessibility stuff in the States is bigger than the population of Canada. So that's one thing.
Slightly, yeah.
And then my question was, can you go back to the ones where you have the different types of screen readers on?
This one?
Yeah. If you were to test for like the voiceover, narrator, talkback, how much would that work on JAWS for the most part?
Yes and no. So it's pretty challenging. There's going to be discrepancies between JAWS and voiceover and talkback and Windows Narrator. There's going to be discrepancies between all of them. Also. I have a lot of voice sometimes. People in the back hear me even if I talk over here. Sort of? Yes? Okay. I'll just talk over. So the question was, are there discrepancies between all the different screen readers? So yes, there are. And absolutely, you as an organization or you as a team have to decide where are our limits and where are we going to put most of our focus. JAWS is $1,000. I mean, not every company has a budget to go and spend $1,000 to test. But Chromebox and NVDA, if we look at the stats to say which tools are the most used, JAWS still comes out number one at 50-some%. But then Chromebox and NVDA come at their own, they're speaking up because they're free, right? And I mean, if I was blind and Chrome came and I could just download that tool, why would I spend another $1,000 on the next upgrade of JAWS? So to answer your question, yes, there are discrepancies. On your tablets, use just what you have native there, and on desktop application, use any of the free tools. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes.
So on the web, like the screen readers, do they work using the rendered result?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how they're used in something else. All I know is I download them and they use them. Great question. I'll look it up. No, correct. Yes.
You know what has to be, how it has to be formatted for it to apply in a reader mode or something like that?
No, reader mode doesn't usually fall into the accessible area. I mean, luckily, actually, what the reader mode ties in is to this format here. So it does away with a lot of the nav and the asides and stuff like that, because where a lot of your content should be is the article. So that's what it does. It does away with all the other elements. It just kind of hides it, and then it says, well, everything's in the article, and that's how we should go. But specifically for how screeners interact with them, I'm not sure. I've never tested it. Good question. Yes? How accurate are testing tools? Mm-hmm. So my experience mostly with Axe and DAP, you get a good 99% all the way there. But unfortunately, the only way to test this really is to go and hand the device to someone who uses the tool and says, just use it, right? I learned the most from someone from IBM Research who is blind, who came and showed me how someone who is blind uses the screen reader. And it's not the way I use the screen reader, because they know all the tools and all the techniques and all the tips and how to use it. And so for him, for example, color contrast, which comes out in that report, means nothing to him. He doesn't care. In fact, some developers really believe in having a button when you say accessible mode, remove CSS completely. Just do away with all of it and allow someone to navigate the site without CSS. But those reports, Axe and DAP specifically, they're really great to show someone who has buy-in, a lead, something like that, and say, look, we've now passed all of these tests. We are now ready to go live, or we are now accessible enough that we're not going to be tagged under the kind of violation. Does that answer your question?
What do you think is the most challenging introduction that you make to one that developers can find about adapt for accessibility?
Absolutely, that 400% Zoom. 100%, because you're restructuring the entire everything, right? And we're talking about forms that don't work anymore, elements that are too large for the site. Because I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that when you zoom into a page, your browser actually defaults to a more responsive mode, right? It goes into the portrait mode and then into the mobile mode. So imagine if you blow past that mobile size mode of the site and you turn it into something garish. Well, you kind of have to plan for that. You kind of have to learn to stack your elements, and they should automatically switch down and stuff like that. So by and large, the 400% zoom is going to affect the most just visually, because that's what. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just going to say, as a developer, it was one of the most rewarding times I had when I was doing accessibility for Zim, and I was able to close my eyes, and somebody told me what shape and what color to make. And using sliders and things, I was able to make a triangle that was yellow when they requested it. I opened my eyes, and there it was. It was like, ah! So I certainly encourage you all as developers to handle that accessibility to no cost.
Thanks. Yes. So normally, going back to JAWS, that's my primary tool. They say JAWS and Firefox work together, and that's what they're supposed to be. Browser, IE is always a huge pitfall and a ton of time and a big disaster. But I tend to, when someone asks me something like that, like where should we start? I always say Chrome and Chromebox. That market share, you're going to satisfy a lot of that criteria. You're always going to find edge cases, even in defects when you release something. You're always going to find something that doesn't work, even 10 years down the road. So this will follow along that same line, but just target your biggest market share. You're pretty much good. Yes?
From your experience, what's the effort added just for accessibility?
Specifically for accessibility, the earlier you start, the better it is. That's why I try to encourage devs to learn even the smallest amount of accessibility. Just learn to stop making widgets, or back in Angular 1 days, stop putting ng-click on like anchor text. It doesn't, just use it down the button, because it just works so much better. So at the very beginning, you're looking about 10%, give or take. Maybe closer to 5 actually. But as you go on, having to rewrite code. I was brought into a large banking project where I had to rewrite like 6 months worth of code. That was so much effort, and there was me full time on that, almost solo. And so that was, needing full-time developer to specialize in accessibility to do that requires much more. Yes. That's actually a great point.
Can you?
Yeah. I'll just sum that up a little bit. The gentleman said that there are courses, classes, information. Sheridan and OCAD. There are lots of resources at both Sheridan and OCAD. And actually that reminded me, LITO, which is a talk specific on accessibility, hosts a lot of their events at OCAD. There's lots of resources there, so that probably all ties in together. And that's, so thank you. Great, well, thank you very much everyone.
Thanks.